So everyone can see us. They might have to go the opposite way. Gail's back. Move in, Mom. You're not in.
Okay.
Okay. So we're talking about your first house.
Second house.
No. Your first house first. We're talking about your first house.
First house is
the basement.
Second house, yes.
Oh, sorry, your second house.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
We have 3.
So your second house, your
Structural damage.
Okay.
Lay it on us. Go.
So the experience there was that the builder, with any basement, when they put a sump pump in, they're supposed to put it in with stone and filter fabric. So when the water table rises, it just pumps out the water instead of realistically the sand, which undermined the footings.
Right.
So.
But what happened? So you guys got a flood in your basement. It was was it El Nino?
It was El Nino, and the rain started. Realistically, be careful.
I see. I'll wave to you guys all in a little bit because I can't.
So with El Nino, normally the water table rises back in April, and then you put your sprinklers on and the water table drops. But that year in November, we had El Nino, and the water table, it started raining so much that the water table started rising, and the pump started pumping, and it basically, what we saw in the driveway was a lot of sand, which we didn't understand the big issue. But in March, there was a structural damage. Basically, there was a crack in the basement foundation back in March, and that took that long, where it was just basically draining. Every time the water table rose, the pump was pumping, and all that sand underneath undermined the footings. So, and the footings, it was in a corner. So literally we had about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of a crack that went right below where the sewer line goes out. So every time the rain started, all this mud would come back
into the house. I don't remember that. I just remember the basement being soaking wet, and there was like 2 feet of water, and you were crying. Bob was kind of crying.
Well, it was, it was, the only thing I would tell your mother is, it could be worse. We would look at California and they would have mudslides. So,
it was like a mudslide in the basement. So yeah, make sure you should have a basement if you live in a high water.
Well,
make sure you don't have a basement if you live in a high water.
Make sure you should.
But do you think that would happen now if you were to build a new house, or no? Like, was that an anomaly on the street because of the builder, or did you just?
I think the builder was lazy, didn't put if he had put in the sub pump properly, we wouldn't have the issue. It would have just kept pumping the water out and kept the sand, because the filter fabric keeps the sand out.
Okay.
So when you have the water table rise, and especially in this area, it's very sandy soil, that fine sand makes it through, and the pump is just pumping.
Because you're down the shore.
Yes.
That's why.
That's correct.
So if you built a house on the water, could you have a basement or no?
No.
Okay.
No. Even here.
Some of them do though, honestly.
Well, it depends, but not really. It depends on the water table.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it, but.
It depends as where you come. Even like this house, we were supposed to have a basement, and they did the testing, and the water table was 4 feet below here, so we couldn't have a basement.
So when could you have a basement? What does the water table have to be?
It would at least be 12 feet down, because your foundation and your footings, you're digging deep for your basement.
So nobody on the street really should have a basement.
And no one does.
Oh, okay.
Even in our old house in Antoinette Court, we were supposed to have a basement.
Right.
Okay. The only person that was able to have a basement, which was Pete across the street. He was the first house, and he told me the only reason he picked that lot was when they did the testing, he was allowed a basement.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
So
what was the $90,000 that I've told everybody about?
Well, the nice thing about New Jersey is whenever you buy a new house, you get an insurance from the state. It's basically new property insurance that the state provides. And in closing,
up to 10 years, right?
it's 10 years.
Yeah,
It's only available for 10 years. And initially, the first 2 years, it's really things that the builder doesn't come back fixing, little things here or there. And they actually hold the builder accountable.
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, yeah.
Is this something you just get when you build a
Automatically.
home?
A brand new house, when you close, you get a insurance
Oh,
from the state of New Jersey.
okay,
And again, they hold the contractor liable for that 10 years.
okay.
Okay. So luckily, I remember that, and I called the state and said, hey, I have a structural damage. They told me, and I called the building department, and they said, well, it's been 7 years. It better be structural because we're not coming for little stuff. So, and the interesting part is that the supervisor of that department actually lived in Brick. He said, oh, before I go to my office in Trenton, I'll stop by. And he stopped by, I looked at, and he goes, yep, you have a structural damage.
But you said that you worked with an architect.
Well, what happens
get that
is,
in
so,
order, right?
we're working with the state. You have to, they basically said, okay, you're approved, you're insured. Now the process starts and the onus is all on you. And with state, you always have to get 2 bids. So the first step was, and I asked the state, well, what do I got to do? They said, well, you got to get an analysis done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I went around looking for who would do it, and an engineering company or an architect. And many architects that I called on, they don't do that. They don't do the engineering analysis, any of that stuff. So I called the state. They said, well, who do you deal with? Because I can't find anyone. And they actually recommended this company called Muser Rutledge, which were actually an engineering company out of New York City. And they recommended them because they get involved with a lot of stuff.
They
So
worked on skyscrapers. in the
yeah,
city.
they so I called them
Built it.
and they gave me a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
But so I sent it into the state and they said, well, you need another proposal. So I said, all right, well, I went around looking, but I basically made an Isaac Engineering and I put another good proposal in. So
this is how my Assyrian father does it, people.
well, it's basically, realistically, the state wants to go with the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find any other engineering companies.
And your house was literally moments away.
Yeah,
from falling
and
down.
and the state recommended them, so it wasn't like I was stealing money. It was just the whole intent was to get engaged with the that company, the engineering company, which was they were exceptional actually.
So what they do?
So the engineer came in, and the first step was they actually did an analysis. They call it a Doppler Analysis, which they scanned the floor of the basement floor to see all the voids. Where were the voids where they lost all the soil?
Oh, they can see that?
Yeah, with the
Special equipment.
That's
it's
cool.
called, it's almost like sonar,
Uh-huh.
and they send the scan and they come out with where the voids are.
Oh, interesting.
And they said in the garage, it was the Grand Canyon. So don't bring your car
in there.
because there's no
Were you
soil.
like freaking out?
Yeah, we weren't allowed to go to one corner of our bedroom
Right.
because that one corner that he was talking about was where the void was in the foundation. And he said, I wouldn't go anywhere near that corner of your bedroom, which was on the 2nd floor, because the house you'd fall.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we had to wait, yeah.
So after that analysis, they said, okay, now get 2 companies to come resolve this. And both companies, what they're looking to do is actually fill the voids. Excuse me. And I would have basically, they said every 5 feet in the basement, they cut a hole and they would put in, they would start pumping this concrete mixture.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to actually watch very closely the pressure because they could have actually, with too much pressure, they would actually lift the house. So they have to do that.
It was complicated.
Yeah. And then even in that
I feel like
situation,
you're sweating.
It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible.
and even in that situation, you have to find 2 companies to do that.
Wow.
So every time, whatever you're doing, anyway, we found the right company. I asked Mr. Rutledge who would they recommend, and they did the one particular engineering company. So I worked with them. And again, so that was the next step. They put that in. And so they built what they call mini piles. They basically said, your house ain't going anywhere and made it very secure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step was to put a true French drain in.
Oh, I remember that.
After they put all the voids in, a French drain, basically they cut out 2 feet out of the concrete. They dug all that, they put a drain in properly, and then they put filter fabric, stone, the pipe, more stone, and then they closed it all up. And literally in that way, the engineer basically said, with this water, you could actually drink from it because it's so filtered.
Yeah.
So he says, and that worked very well. And they said, you'll survive the next 100-year storm.
Wow.
So it was good. It was about $90,000, and the state paid for it. Thank God.
Big lesson we learned.
Yeah. And the other
which was what? Don't have a basement at that water table?
Actually, I do like that basement, but don't finish it.
Well, check everything out before you decide to do something
Because the
crazy.
state actually didn't want to pay for the finishing either. I had
Make
to
sure
convince
it's
them
right.
that they had to do
That
it.
you can have a basement.
Well, you would have had a big basement in this house, but
Yeah, about 3,500 square foot basement.
Never would do that again.
Okay, let's talk about this house. Yay! So you built this house in 2000. When did you start building
16.
this house?
Oh,
No,
no.
not 2016.
We moved
We
here
started in
2016. We started,
2003.
Yeah.
Okay, you moved in 2006.
2006.
Oh, I was
That's
like,
right.
wait,
I'm
that was
sorry.
like 3 years ago.
2006.
We actually started right when you were in high school, getting ready to graduate. We
Right, and
started-
we didn't move in until I was
2006.
moving. No, I thought when I was a freshman in college.
You were.
Yeah.
We
Oh
moved
yeah,
in,
no,
and
2005.
Your sister graduated,
Okay.
and we 2006.
So it
So
took
it
you
took us how many years?
4 years,
Yeah.
4 years to
3-4
build this
years
house.
to build
Correct.
it. Yeah.
Why did it take so effing long? And as you answer this, I'm going to turn this IG so you can see Mom.
Oh, no, I'm good, really.
Oh no, you're not. Okay, go ahead and tell everybody
I'm really good.
why it took you so long to build this dang house.
Well, lessons learned on that is basically that you don't want to be the first house on the block or the street. So where we found the property, it was basically one house that had all the property and a dirt road to that house.
Yeah.
So working with the builder,
Mom, you're gonna have to move in.
I'm good.
come this way. No,
No,
you
you
can't
gotta
see it.
move in.
You can't turn it the other way? Exactly.
All right, no, that's good. Keep going.
Okay.
We're good.
So as the first house, they had to dewater the property before they lay out the road.
Dewater, what does that mean?
So in any dirt road and anything, before they want to come in with the sewer lines and all of the new street, they had to basically, the water table was high. So when you say dewater, you're moving the water away from that area.
Yeah.
So that's what they did, and that took some time. Our neighbor at that time was the city business administrator. So everything we did or we wanted to do, they had to, requalify to make sure everything we're doing was correct.
Okay.
Right? Because his property was next door, and it took so once everything was done, they went through, started the permits, which we started permits about, a year and a half in. Because realistically, once we found what we want to do, where the property was, we hired an architect to get the blueprints, what we wanted. And the architect took about 8 months.
I remember your architect was down
We
the
were
shore.
down
We
to
would go
LBI.
all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
That took a long time.
well, he would make a lot of mistakes, and I have to correct that.
Or I would change things.
How did you know he was making mistakes?
Well, certain things that we asked for, they weren't there. And then when I went in, took the blueprints to the builder, and he told me it was going to cost me over $1 million. I said, hold on, this is wrong. We said, I'm only building like a 4,000 square foot house. He goes, no, this is a 7,000 square foot house.
Oh my God.
So I went back to the architect.
Yeah, but I don't understand that. So how does an architect
I don't know, but he was
get
well
this
known
wrong by
in
2,000
LBI.
square feet?
He was good.
He was, I think he was very busy.
And he
Yeah.
put what we wanted, and that was it.
We were
But
adding stuff.
I feel like you guys are smart about this. Like most people don't probably. Do you think that most people would have seen that, or they wouldn't have even seen that something wrong was happening?
Well,
It's hard when you got a lot
Or
going
you have
on
to
in
go
that,
between
yeah.
the like, were you taking the architectural plans and then going to the GC and then the GC would flag it? Or did you already know that there was a problem?
I didn't know about the square footage problem. I knew about other little issues that we wanted to add. You know, I'm an engineer, so I could see some things that he's not adding, or he's not making some mistakes just from the footprint perspective. But when it was all done and I brought it to the contractor and he told me it's so large, I went back to the architect. I said, hold on, I contracted you for a 4,000 square foot house. You gave me a 7,000 square foot house. And he wanted to charge me to redo it. I said, that's in the contract. And he said, no, okay, you're right. And then he shrunk it down, and then we had a lot of structural issues because they're trying to shrink 7,000 to 4,000.
After they already framed the house?
No.
No,
This
it
was
was
before.
just on the
It was
paper.
just
On paper,
all
yeah.
blueprints still. And then finally we got to this point because
We learned a lot with
we
that
took-
too.
yeah. 'cause
Which was what?
Like,
well, just the sizes, the
Yeah.
game room. Well, because originally it was.
we were trying to fit too much into 4,000 square feet, I guess, like.
Yeah.
Did you have more rooms in here that, like, in the plans that you don't have in right now?
We had bigger
Yeah.
area.
So the game room was
Game
supposed to
room's
be
bigger.
wider.
Uh-huh.
Our master bedroom had over where our window is.
Oh, right.
It went out.
Over the roof.
It went
And
out.
why didn't you do that? Just because of money?
Well,
It got
footprint.
out of control.
It
Yeah.
was too much.
Mm.
My intent was to spend about $700,000, and when he told me $1 million, we're $300,000 over budget.
Still.
And the other thing
It's like
was,
to be over budget.
and then what happened is once we agreed, when I went back to the builder,
Anthony.
we had
I
agreed.
get it from my mama.
Let's go get him. Where's Anthony?
So we had agreed for the property, just the property, be 50,000. When ready to sign, he wanted 150,000.
Wait, you bought this land you were going to buy this for 50 grand?
Yes,
Mhm.
Wow.
yes,
That's
50,000.
amazing. But
Well-
this street wasn't created yet.
No,
No.
there was nothing here. Then he turned around and says, no, not 50, 150. So
How
it's
many years
already
later?
started,
Yeah.
the negotiations. And then, one thing led to another, and every little thing was a fight with the builder. And
But you purchased this house or this lot, and he was building the rest of the homes, right? So you
Yes.
didn't really have a choice.
We didn't have a choice. We had to use
right?
him.
You bought into
Actually-
like the development.
because I owned the property, my lawyer said I could throw him out and finish with somebody else.
Yeah, but we had started with him.
Right.
So.
So I had the footprints, and he actually used a framer that didn't understand how to build larger houses.
Mhm.
So he had to bring another framer in.
Yeah.
We had a lot of issues. He was also in the middle of building this house. He was building his own house.
Oh, I remember that.
So every time people would come
Yeah.
frame here, they would leave for 2 weeks and then come back. For
A
another
huge
week.
house in down
Curtis
the
Point.
shore.
Yeah.
Curtis Point.
So I would ask the guys, where are you guys? Well, we're building Dennis's house too. So I called the builder and said, this is crazy because I have a construction loan. It's costing me money. He didn't care. But again, so the original framer messed a lot of things up. He didn't put in the correct I-beams in the right, this wall here between the game room and family room, they messed it all up that they had to put a new beam underneath. They literally held the wall up, removed whatever they put in, and put a whole new beam.
But did you know that? Who knew that?
No, the framer did. Because they were right before they were going to put the shingles up in the roof. The weight of that was going to really, they found actually the game room wall was blowing out.
Oh yeah, I remember you said that.
So they had to bring it back in,
Probably
and
give a shot of that later. Turn it
so the
around,
game room
camera
wall, the game room itself,
around. That we're pointing at right now.
it was supposed to have cathedral ceiling,
Uh-huh.
the game room. But
Oh,
because
that
of
sucks.
it was going down, they put in collar ties.
Oh,
That's why the ceiling is in the game room flat,
I see. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah,
I didn't know that you
because
were
we would
supposed
have to
to
have
have that.
cathedral.
Mhm.
Yeah, so all these little things that.
You also found out he was overcharging you for everything, right?
Well, that was the other thing. Yeah, everything that was in the contract. I was working with with his partner initially, and he had itemized certain things.
Mhm.
And then so at a certain point, I had Dennis was the builder. I said, wait a minute, you charged me like $21,000 for concrete work outside. And he was giving me, it wasn't real concrete, okay?
What does that mean?
It was actually what we have on this wall here, the smaller, they call it, they're not real brick.
Veneer.
Yeah, it's just well skinnier. In our family room, those are like smaller bricks.
Veneers.
Yeah.
Well, I want it for outside. I wanted the real stone. He said, no, we don't do that.
Inside.
So,
yeah, because of.
Well, on the outside, we want stone.
Yeah.
But he was going to give me the little veneer. So I said, no, I don't want that. So I should get credit for $21,000. He said, no, that would have I would have done it, and then I have to get paid for it. So he gave me credit for like $8,000. I said, wait a minute, if you didn't do the work, how can you charge
Even
me?
our kitchen, we had our own kitchen person, and they wanted to give us what, 10,000 for the kitchen?
Well, no.
The kitchen or
so originally he
crazy.
came back when we picked everything. Your mother picked all of the cabinets, everything for the kitchen and all the bathrooms there. He came back with a $93,000 cost for everything, right? But he wanted to give me credit for $15,000.
That's what it was. Yeah.
$15,000
For everything?
Yeah, that's what it was.
So the normal builder, which
What was he giving you an allowance for your kitchen? Like $5,000?
Yeah, $5,000.
Yeah.
It was nothing. So that's when I really,
When he started
when I
breaking
call it
things
the
down,
shit hit the fan. I was like, I called Builders General because your mother was working with Builders General, picking everything. I called the guy. I said, "Are you out of mind?" I go, Dennis has charged me $93,000 and only just given me like $15,000. He goes, "What? You should give you credit of $35,000 for this size house and all that." And he goes, "Well, between you and me, you can't tell that I said it, but he's trying to double his profit." So I called Dennis and I said, "Forget it." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't want it. I'll build my own," which again, I could have. So we hired a cabinet guy and we built everything. And I said, "All right, I'll take the $15,000. He goes, "No." He goes, "Now I'll give you $5,000.
He's a little shyster, huh?
So everything, he wouldn't give me the credit that was due that he was charging me for. The basement initially, they were charging me $25,000 for the basement. Now they found out they couldn't do it, so he was giving me like $5,000 credit. So wait a minute, you charged me $25,000. I didn't get a basement.
But what was his rationale? Why wasn't he just giving you the full amount?
Because he said, well, it was all built into the whole project,
Yeah.
so he needs to
One
make
price.
the profit.
Mhm.
So
I mean, I get that to some extent, but it's not fair to
If he's
like
not
lock
doing
you
the
into
job.
a number and then not do the work and then ask you to.
He just
Right.
wouldn't work
Pony
with
up.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wouldn't.
So anyway, that was
Wasn't
lesson
he
learned.
charging you for screens that you already had?
Yeah.
Well, that was the other story was this house completed, all done. We moved in March, and I called. I said, "Where are the screens?"
Mom's
Right.
still crying.
Well,
No,
mommy
it's okay.
counted like 60 windows, and I called
62
Dennis and I
windows.
said, "Where are my screens?" He goes, "You upgraded to the higher Anderson, so you don't get screens, so you have to pay for them." So, and at that time, luckily, we didn't close yet because we didn't have a CO, right? So I told him, "Look, the bank's not going to give me money to close until I have a CO," which was really, I had the money. So thank God we moved in, and now as they say, the shoe's on the other foot because we could live here as long as we want. I still owe him $90,000. So you have his attention because you still owe him, because normally you close on the house, you pay everything, and now the builder, you do a walkthrough, right? And you have a punch out list. Good luck trying to get the builder to come back, and right? That's what everybody tells you.
Terrible though. He was just terrible.
Well, we
That is
had,
There are
like-
good builders out there. We're not trying to.
Most of them are
We just
probably
didn't.
watching. The good
It's
ones
tough.
are watching.
Yeah.
tough.
Like, you know what?
well, we had some that were,
and we may need you guys.
contractors,
So
yeah.
like next house.
But lesson learned was,
We're
again,
gonna do it right this
thank
time.
God I still owed him $90,000, and I made a list of 20 items that needs to be done. There were electrical issues, there
There
were,
was a lot of
all
stuff
little
that
things.
he didn't care about.
So the screens, right? You talk about the screens. So I said, "Dennis, I have $90,000. I could take it out of that." No, okay, I'll look into it. So a couple of days, I'm in the attic. I have boxes and boxes. I'm like,
Of
"What are
screens.
these?" So I open up the
He
box.
doesn't even know what's going on.
There's
Oh
the
my
screens.
God.
So I called him.
got
I said,
screens,
"Dennis,
yeah.
I got the screens." He goes, "You don't get screens." I said, "I got all the screens in
They were
the attic." Because when they got the windows, they got the screens, they didn't know what to do with them. They put them all in the attic. And it took almost 2 years to build the house. So
They forgot. Oh my God.
But he just wanted to fight us on everything. That was basically.
So.
Oh, that's exhausting. So what would you do differently in the next house?
I'd ask you who your builders are, like who you would recommend now that you're the pro.
I have a couple of people I wouldn't recommend.
Well, my feeling is if you could do it yourself, like be your own general contractor, find a property, work with an architect.
That's a lot to manage.
Right? But going through this, I found so what does the builder do, right? He hires a framer, he hires a plumber, I could do the same, but you got to find those people and you manage that, because the expectation is you build this big building, big house. You want the best, but you get the builder's grade, which I found builder's grade is pretty much crap.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to realize what you want as the quality. You should add another $100,000 easily for stuff that you want to add to. You're not going to go with regular cabinetry for your kitchens or your regular flooring. They don't give you any of that. You know? Because there's lots of grades.
Yeah.
And the builders say, okay, well, you have these options right here. Then you look outside of that, there's an extra cost.
Yeah.
And that's what
the way it is. Yeah.
I would, even if I go build a new house, I would want to know those costs.
Yeah.
Right. Identify all those costs, and it would every time to me, when you go find a new house, you have to sign a contract, and that contract is actually generated by the builder's lawyers, so it all favors them.
Mm-hmm.
So I always want to say, I take the contract, and if you hire an attorney, you want them to really look at that.
Yeah.
And say, you got a view on my stuff.
My dad said next time he builds a house, he's going to GC it himself.
Oh, we got a lot of time in our hands.
That's the plan.
But I think that's a good point. So Anthony and I tried to GC the exterior. It wasn't something that we ever did before. And because we didn't have the time to sit and babysit people, it was a lot harder than I think we thought. But you've already been through it before.
Yeah.
So I think it would be easier for you because you already know what the terribleness looks like.
Right.
So this way you at least have a base to start from. Whereas other people, if they're building their first home, I don't think that they'd want to GC their own project.
Absolutely not.
No, but I think we kind of know now what we could do, what we should do.
And if we got lucky.
This is what home for you?
Third.
Number home?
Three.
But this is your second new
New
construction.
house. Yes, that's correct.
So that would be 3 times that you'd be building your own house.
Right.
Yeah. Which
I
came
would
with a
say
lot of lessons.
Our second house, which we built, the builder was very accommodating. So I made some changes, and he was very accommodating.
But it was a lot smaller.
It was smaller,
2,500 square
and it
feet.
was something that they already had done previously. We made some modifications,
but
very accommodating.
Mm-hmm.
You have other builders who say, "Here's the plans. This is what we're going with."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
this was custom.
So to me, if you like what you see,
house.
you have to. To me, again, if you're doing your custom house, get the blueprints from the architect that you like, and then even if you want to go with a GC who knows and you like them, he's got good. Then you sit with the GC and say, "This is an expectation."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, electrical. The builder wouldn't give me any hi-hats or anything. He says, all you get is one light here, one light there, one light there.
What?
So he wanted $150 a light. So I said, no. I said, just put the lights in.
That was also 10 years ago?
That was
15 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's like $150 a light now.
Yeah.
Damn, they got you, bah.
I did it my own.
He did it.
Oh, you did?
I ran all of them except the real tall ones. But I ran all the hi-hats and everything. So
But your background is an engineer.
I'm an engineer.
So let's not encourage
anyone. Anyone's handy. Well, the electric, it's not on, okay? You're running wires and you're just putting hi-hats in, which is not really that difficult, honestly.
Yeah.
You just got to lay it out where you think it would be, and then, because all you're seeing is really 2x4s.
Yeah.
So it's not that difficult, honestly.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining. screaming. See, this wasn't
Good
that
luck.
painful.
No.
Happy
fun.
Mother's Day.
Happy
I just want
Mother's
to
Day.
see. Hold on, I'm gonna get like really close to the screen. I just want to see if we have anybody asking any questions. Hey, Sarah. Sarah's on. Sarah's my client.
I have to put my
Terry's
glasses
on. All
so
right,
you
no
can-
questions through the Zoom. And everybody says hello. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Anne Marie, you got a lot of fans on Facebook.